2008. I've been engaged since 2003. Before that, I was working for the UN World Food Programme for a short while, and before that, studying biology. I've been working in almost every single campaign area that we have in Greenpeace, and so that means forest, oceans, Arctic. I've been running our global finance work. I've been doing a lot of work on energy transition, on doing in-depth reports about how you go to 100% renewable energy system. I've been working with different crises, and I was a program manager or head of the Swedish office for a while, and then I moved into supporting the Ukraine crisis when that started, and now I'm leading a big global project called the Wellbeing Economy, connected to what we're going to talk about today, which is system change. And I'm going to present a few slides for you, and then after that, I hope we can sort of have a more in-depth discussion and also go into the exercise. So just briefly, who we are. When we look at the global website, it says that Greenpeace exists because this fragile earth deserves a voice. It talks about solutions, change, and action. And what you often see from Greenpeace is the actions. But in recent years, we've been quite focused on what's wrong and what we want to stop. But here at the core of our sort of mission is to also talk about solutions. So looking at sort of the mission statement is to ensure the ability of Earth to nurture life in all its diversity and protect it from various types of threats, including promote peace and global disarmament. We're right now in what the researchers describe as a planetary emergency. That means that it's not only climate change, there's also other big threats like the introduction of novel entities or ocean acidification, geochemical flows. I also don't think this is actually the latest version of this. It has changed since this was done. So it's not just climate change. We're destroying and depleting the Earth's ability to nurture itself in many different ways. And all of these crises are interconnected. So this is from the Global Risk Report from the World Economic Forum this year. They give out this risk report every year. This year, a lot of threats is focused on social polarization, lack of economic opportunity. And last year, all the biggest threats were more related to climate change, natural resources, but also cost of living crisis for people. So we see that the fact that we're in such a big crisis, it's not surprising because they're interlinked. There's a connection between these crises, and we cannot no longer handle them in silos. Like, we have built ourselves into a system that's not serving us. It's not making anyone happy. It's colonial, it's extractivist, and it's becoming an existential threat, where the way we've set up our economic system is now a threat to our future and our livelihoods. And it's quite difficult to sort of take in all the problems. Here's an example from a seminar, a lecture that like a prominent, I'm not sure if he was professor, but anyways, he's been providing input to the IPCC report, and he's working with developing in the African country, on the African continent. And he took this example of, like, often we talk about providing money for the loss and damage fund in the climate context. We talk about, maybe you've heard about different type of money going to annual climate financing. That's things that often come up in the sort of global political climate discourse. But the reality is that the way we structure our economy is that $2 trillion worth of US dollars is the flow from the global south to the global north annually. And that's because you know, like the China, US, Europe are grabbing resources and extracting minerals, oil, whether it's agricultural things, and buying it cheap and then doing all the manufacturing in their countries. So instead of like producing, instead of using, for instance, the minerals that exist in, you would have international companies taking those minerals and then not buying electricity expensively. So you would like, yeah, basically it's a structural problem where Ethiopia, for instance, have 20 million people who are on food aid, but at the same time, the country is one of the biggest exporters of cut flowers for Valentine's Day. So it's a structural problem where our economy, our trade system have locked us into a situation where countries and less advantaged groups within countries all over the world are locked into poverty and suffering. And also, you know, on the top of that, you also, of course, have the profits of these big international companies who don't have to pay any tax, who are, you know, based in tax havens, etc. So this is the macroeconomic structure related to the World Bank, related to the IMF, related to how we've set up this global system. And it's very difficult to think, how are we going to change our economic system in the way that's produced? Another really big problem at the moment is that this polycrisis we're in is increasing insecurity for people. So people feel they're afraid of what's going on. And there's also a big political vacuum on the left or social side of the spectrum on how to address that. While on the right wing or more far right, populist side of the spectrum, those actors are phrasing themselves very practical and appealing to people. So they are talking about people's needs. They're talking about food, housing, energy price, fuel prices, things that people care about. Almost every single, you know, big revolution you've seen in the world has related to things such as bread or the ability to like get by. So there's a big, some call it the crisis of imagination, where more progressive politicians are no longer able to present alternatives to these appealing alternatives that comes from the populist side of the spectrum. And of course, social media hasn't helped, and the fact that these actors don't follow the rules of the game anymore. But this year, half of the world is voting, and we're also, as you experiencing those increasing crises. So when people are so that's a good moment to engage, because people will be interested in political reforms. People will be interested in like, what are politicians doing to save us from what's going on? Here's some examples of like protests in Brussels from farmers, or wildfires and droughts. So what is it that we need to do? What is the big thing that we need to do to get out of this mess? Well, we need to rethink, redefine, redesign, and rebuild. So we have a lot of infrastructure and things built already, but we have to really go to the root cause and rethink how we do things. Well, for instance, again, back to our economy, the fiat system we're currently operating under, that's a system that requires depth. Depth is, as when private banks create money, that process will create depth. And at the moment, we also have this sort of global financial architecture where a lot of countries are so in so much depth. And the big financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank are run by the wealthy countries, that it's very difficult to ever be able to like build this functioning society because of the depth trap they're in. So, but where do we start? Well, we're in this old world where oligarchs and other power holders are running the world and pushing us towards catastrophe. And we want to go to this new emerging paradigm, this new world. As with everything else, it starts with individuals thinking about doing something and then slowly joining forces, like you're doing with your work, into hubs, starting to mobilize, build broader and broader movements, put it into practice, put these thinking into like actually not just thinking about what you want to stop and what's wrong, but starting to live the new. Then you get to tipping points where those new practices are becoming the accepted way of doing things in society. And then you build real political power. And then that's the normal way to view the world, also called like moving the Overton window. So our analysis at the moment is that, you know, we can talk about system change in terms of like, okay, let's try to reform the global financial architecture, and let's ask for a completely new way to create money. Some people are working on that, but we also need to act within the system we have now and create things that will serve also the new system. So an example of that's popping up more and more in science is a focus on well-being. So the thinking here is that by driving policies towards well-being for people and planet, you start creating pillars of the new emerging system that you can introduce already now in the current system. So it's not a matter of things having to completely break down before you start doing the new. Examples of that can be like a 4-day work week, or it can be free public transport. That's something that decreases inequality, benefits the groups that need it the most, but at the same time, it also reduces emissions and reduces use of resources. So here's an example from Nature, where academics on both the sort of inequality side of things and natural sciences side of things are starting to collaborate and talk about how stability and resilience for the Earth systems are linked to human well-being. So like this, a social floor and environmental boundaries are both as needed to get to where we want. IPCC is also starting to talk about this, sufficiency policies, that a set of measures and daily practices that avoid demand for energy, materials, land, and water while delivering human well-being for all within planetary boundaries. So like, that's where we need to go. Kate Raworth is maybe the donut economic model is maybe something you come across. Her main theory is that you have environmental boundaries. That's also the previous models of the that was shown in one of the first slides with the environmental boundaries on different biodiversity and climate and how we're treating the land. But we also need the social floor. So that's where the safe human corridor inside that donut, that's where it exists. And that's well-being for people and planet. And it's very much about meeting people's needs on housing, mobility, water, energy, and connecting back to what I said about, you know, elections and about what people care about. That's what people care about. That's how you win elections, how you get people to listen, how you get people interested. It's about their needs. So that's where we need to be as well, because in a very polarized world where division is increasing and people are disinformation and misinformation is increasing, we cannot talk about doing the right thing for climate for the sake of it. We need to be very clear about how it's going to serve people. So in wealthy countries or wealthy societal groups within all countries or the ultra-rich, they're using too much of the common resources and polluting too much of the common space. So therefore we need like political policies that push them in, you know, their usage, their footprint towards the social environmental boundaries need to decrease, need to ban them from using private jets or yachts. And in terms of like the social floor here, well, maybe we need more of like progressive tax situation where a basic need for people could be that you need 30 square meters to live at. But beyond that, if you have 5 castles, that should cost a lot of money. So that if you're taking a lot of space in terms of resources, energy, and such things, it should be associated with a cost. In poor countries or marginalized groups within countries that don't have enough resources or means to get by, who don't have access to electricity or clean water or education or things like that, there we need to get people up to the social floor here. So there we need policies that allow countries and individuals to thrive, and at the same time make sure that they don't add pressure to these life-supporting systems, the environmental boundaries, because the discourse in the climate sphere is very much the global south, or if you can talk about that in that space anymore, but like us saying we have the right to develop, we should also be able to open coal mines and go for the same kind of dirty economic development that you've done in the global north. And why should we not have the right to do that? So, but there's a difference between having, of course, having the right to sort of evolve, but in terms of, we just need to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes and add to the pressure on the environmental boundaries, because then we're cutting off the branch that we're all sitting on. So that's a little bit of a background, and then I have time for it. I have many other slides, but I decided to not show so many of them. So I just wanted to stop there for questions and maybe a little bit of discussion, and then we can go into the exercise.
I just have a comment that your presentation reminded me of, is that here we talked a lot, I mean, here in Hungary, we talked a lot about the degrowth movement. And there was one sentence that really caught my mind when I heard a presentation about degrowth, is that it said private sufficiency versus public luxury. And so they say that the government's job would be to provide these luxuries for the public, and each individual would live as small scale as possible. So for example, if there would be really nice public beaches with really nice things to do there, and it's clean and it's nice and it's enjoyable, and there would be more of that, then people wouldn't need like individual pools in their house. So, and basically this can be the same with everything. That if we have these public luxurious things that we can share together, and we're not just using it individually, it can be a big reform in the society, because it can also bring back this sense of community and solidarity because we are using it together. But it still gives you this luxurious feeling, because a lot of times we are only talking about sacrifices, that we have to sacrifice our wealth and stuff in order to live a green life. But they say that this is actually not true. We just have to shift where the luxury is, and that luxury shouldn't be a private thing, it should be a public thing. And in the private life, you should live as small scale as possible. So I just thought that I'd share this thought.
Thank you. I mean, 100% agree. I mean, we agree with the degrowth theories or post-growth, But in terms of whether it's a practical frame for campaigning or not, there like many people, you know, think that degrowth, they don't like degrowth, of course, encompasses the thinking that some parts of the world have the right to develop. So it's not degrowth doesn't have to happen everywhere. It's like shrink and share for those who need to shrink and share. But we're not associating ourselves to that movement because of that. But like on a theoretical level, we're 100% behind it. And you're absolutely right. Like shift the concepts in your head. And also in terms of climate, I think here in the global north, it's like people think that they will have to sacrifice their well-being for the climate. And as long as we're there, it's much more appealing with, you know, populists, what they're presenting. So that's where we need to find those good examples of, and reframing it to show that, look, they're actually stealing from us. They're stealing our future from us, etc. And we don't have what we need. Okay, Olivia, and then Maciej, and then Amaluka.
Yeah, August.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. And I think that the main problem here is that we know what to do, and our politicians know what to do. But and the situation is also like you mentioned, Olga, with the clean water and so on, and people have pools. We can see that is like in Sweden we have, you know, you can go swimming in Stockholm, in the capital, with the waters being clean, and in the lakes, and people still building pools like maniacs everywhere in our capital and around. As soon as the people have money, it seems like they just, now let's spend more and renovate our house, and when we buy a new apartment, even if it's newly renovated, we take everything out because we can. And I think that's like the issue we have here. It's like people can do it, so they will. And I think that is the pressure we need to push each other as, you know, as friends, and question, not like, oh, what a nice pool, cool. But it's really difficult. I think in what have happened now in Sweden is we need to have more social pressure, I think, rather than what's happening on the politics level, because it's pedaling backwards. But also, we just want to mention one thing that, well, so in the presentation, you referred also to the World Economic Report, and so my background is with a disaster area, disaster risk reduction. I was saying that we warned about this for, I think, about 15 years ago, and showing that if we don't act now, the disaster will just increase, especially floods and droughts, and we don't have the financing in the aid or the other sectors to actually help people. So we need to do more. And that was also the connection between the social. But there were so many people who were like, that is, we don't have time to talk about that, and we don't want to invest in things. And then suddenly now we are in this mega disasters that is happening now. And now the politician like, oh, it's very expensive with a disaster, so we maybe should do something. So we're like, we told you 15 years ago. So I understand that it's this thing with it's so complex, but I'm really happy, like you're saying, that people are coming together, and I'm so happy that people start understanding that we can mitigate things, not just talking about prevention, but also mitigate them in a better way. So thank you, very interesting.
Maybe just a quick comment on that regarding because you're talking of the need of like a cultural shift rather than a policy shift, because we're seeing such a big political backroll. Yes, but I'm also shifting that back, because politicians need mandate from people to act. You know, we have the Green New Deal in the EU because of Fridays for Future and XR and that big global climate movement in 2019. Now it's going to be a completely different political outcome on the European level, for example. And so there are progressive politicians who don't necessarily want to see the environment be broken down and misery grow for their private gains, but they don't feel that they have the mandate, or they lack the ideas. And that's why I'm saying that I think we need to be much more not supporting each other about what we're not going to do. We need to talk about what we should do, the society we want, and key things that are important now and in the future, and that holds, you know, the things that holds. So that's just one thing on the sort of, because democracy is still the best thing we've got. So we need to protect that and not turn away from it as well, in a way. And then regarding the adaptation versus mitigation, like whether are we, I think that we will see money emerging for handling crisis adaptation that can also be used to mitigate, so to stop the problems from happening. So that's also a type of reframing that's going on. Oh, maybe you didn't spend money to stop it, but maybe you can be smart about how you're spending money to adapt to it, and it's actually stopping more of it. Much it.
Very much, Isadora, for the presentation. I think from that I learned a lot. What I will share is surely a comment, but maybe we can have some questions. So in the presentation we had parts where we had up to $2 trillion living from the global south, so the global north. But you said it's in form of maybe natural resources, if I'm not mistaken, like it's not really in terms of money, but when try to convert it, is more of natural resources. That is the correct, yeah. So thank you. So we see that at that point of time, you said the main point is for everybody to have the well-being. But at the same time, if you try like to compare the analysis, you see that those in the global south are those who are, let me just put it in quote, mostly regarded like those who are poor, or whereas they're the one from which most of the resources are being taken. Sometimes we take it like the wealth curse, like it's a curse because you have the wealth, but you cannot really be rich with what you have. It's like a curse. But now, the main point now, maybe this can be the question, is now to see how all those wealth can be used in a positive way for everybody, irrespective of your geographical area or your race or your gender, to have a good well-being. That's why I think at some point of time you said we need to rethink, we need to redefine. But at the same time, that's my comment, and the same point my question, because looking at what is living from the global south going to the global north, but we're still seeing this issue of well-being which is at stake. Like what is going on, whereas we are seeing all these how can I say, these resources that is available. It's true, we are still coming back to the point of policy, but I think these people are really aware, and that's maybe where we really need to focus more, like the system change. So that's what I wanted to add on. Thank you.
Thank you. I shared the presentation that this brilliant researcher, Fadeh Kaboub, that's where the slide comes from. So it's also a place to dive deeper into those things, or maybe even contact him and check it out, because but the point he's making is that, you know, instead of just extracting resources and having the economy be at the bottom of the value chain, you would create more jobs if you started to have solar panel factories and stuff, rather than just having you know, other countries grabbing the minerals or extracting the things at the bottom of the value chain. But it's like the differences are within society. It's between north and south, but it's also inside societies. And then on top of that, we have the ultra rich. So they're depending on which. There are also wealthy individuals in each society that has a problem. Another key point from his presentation was that there needs to be more collaboration between African countries to like be a stronger player, basically. But it's not actually my area of expertise, so I would rather refer the detailed questions to him. Okay, Amaluka.
Hi everyone, good day. Isadora, thank you for the presentation. I joined late, I had other family commitments to attend to. But then when I joined, there's one thing that I heard you say about, firstly, us as communities being resilient, coming together and reaching that peak point where we stand for one thing. And then the second thing you said is that we should also understand that for political parties or head of states, for them to remain relevant, they need a mandate, and mandate comes from us. I think those are very important key factors for me. I think one thing that I've realized ever since I've been in the climate movement is that, one, as different organizations working towards the same goal, we have different objectives and different commitments, and we have like this dotted line, because we also are tied to certain donors that we need to meet certain things that the donors require from us. And that I also find it as a huge challenge in different countries. The reason being, one, the communities, when we do our work in communities, what I've seen is that many organizations go to these communities, you want to build a movement. However, when you build this movement, the biggest focus is to push your own agenda. You don't literally think about what is the bigger issue in that community. And then your agenda could become secondary, or you can find a way to infuse your agenda within the immediate issues that the communities are facing. I think that it's one big downfall in most organizations, that we do not take time to understand that you are working with community A from the forest community, but are they really, is the priority deforestation for them or what? And you want to build a community, but you come and you just inject deforestation campaign unto them without firstly understanding where they are and how we can then bring those factors together and infuse that. I think once we get to a point as the world, be it in Africa or global south or global north, as it may be, we can then be able to build these movements that can bring constructive change and put so much pressure to the government, because at the end of the day, the mandate comes from us. If certain things are those things that we want, they will have to listen and dance to our guitar. But if we do not change that mindset of just going there and wanting to push our agenda, meeting only our objectives, these movements that we want to build, the unification of all communities in the world, will not happen, because we are coming and ballooning into places and pushing our agenda. So for me, I think that is very, very important, that we build those relationships in a very positive way for our communities. But if we don't do that, I feel we're going to keep on changing strategies after strategy after strategy, but we won't get the movement, we won't build that movement. And this is why I love Planet One. Our project, I love it because of this. It meets people where they are. We get to understand where they are and what they want to do, and how do we then bring our agenda, but infuse it to the immediate things that they want with the youth. So I think if many organizations could really adapt that and work with it, I think we can literally bring a greater change in the world, in the climate justice space. Yeah, thank you.
Great remarks. I mean, just 100% agree on that, and that both on the two things that, you know, we're communities, and by coming together we will push the tipping points, but also you're pointing to sort of a more of a colonial approach to working with various affected groups in a way. And I don't know, I've in Sweden I've worked quite a lot with indigenous or you know had teams that have been working with indigenous communities, where we in some ways have a joint agenda, but not completely. So it's and then you cannot just like bulldoze in with like, hey, we want to save this forest and you happen to live here and let's do it together. You have to work very slow and build trust but you also have to be honest and true and be like, look, this is our agenda. We'll put it on the table. And what's your agenda? Okay, can we do something together? Should we collaborate in some ways? Or so because there's also examples where I think, you know, from my perspective, where, for instance, coming from Greenpeace, where we've collaborated when we like completely eradicated ourselves in a way, and for good and for bad. But then it also means that, okay, we don't get people supporting us anymore because they never see our brand anymore, and then we lose the global strength we had, which could be of service. So there's this you know, it requires honesty and transparency and respect, and but of course, as you said, always listening first and sensing and finding. And I also think that in order to like, I don't think we need to build a global movement to, I honestly think that that these crises we're seeing, that they are breaking down the global economic system, you know, eventually. You know, this era is falling apart, and it's okay. So maybe we don't need to add more strength to like increase the fragmentation in the world. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, we need to think global, but all the solutions are local, because ecosystems are local and communities are local. So while it's good with UN governance to some degree, like the solution is all in the local. So we perhaps we don't need that much global stuff in a way. Robert and Barbara.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. My question was, you've spoken about there existing two groups. On one spectrum, there's people who are ultra rich, who pollute the most because they're extracting the most from the earth. And on the other side, there's those who get almost nothing from the earth. And for there to be systems change, there should be like a middle ground where no one is lacking and no one is taking too much. I just wanted to know, how hard is it for people to agree on what this middle ground is? Is it like something straightforward, like people will agree this is what basic housing should be for everyone, and this is the kind of food that everyone should be getting? Or is it like debatable or between the groups? Also, is it something that changes maybe from region to region or with time? Just wanted to know who decides the middle ground and how easy it is to decide what it is.
Yeah, like, I mean, the natural scientists and inequality scientists that I was referring to here, they are trying to figure it out. So, like, for instance, I heard I think I can't swear on this this figure, but like the World Resource Institute says that, you know, you cannot have more than 30 square meter per person live on more than 30 square meter per person from a resource point of view. Then your living has used too much. So, but that's of course a very weird average, because, you know, some people live happily on less, and some people, and also, you know, it's also a matter of climate, weather. In some part of the world, you can live, you know, big without a big impact, etc. So defining the middle is tricky. The boundaries is easier, even though they're not fully there quite yet either. But I also think that, you know, there's been so much work with like it's also much more about starting to just like shift the levers a little bit, so that, you know, if you, and in terms of food, water, energy, those kind of things, you know what the basic needs are. You could say, what do you need to, and how much money do you need to get by? Those things are sort of fairly easy to get to a level of what would be needed. Like, what are basic needs that should be covered? It's more difficult with, I think Oxfam's latest report that came out earlier this year talked about the 5 richest individuals polluting more than the 60% of all the rest of the world or something. I don't remember. I have to dig it out and share it. But like the problem is that our economic system is like, it's completely it's an exponential growth of the wealth at the top. So they're doing so much damage, this ultra rich, or the rich 10% is doing a lot of damage, while a lot of people are having no impact at all. So I think in terms of like what is well-being for society, maybe have to be developed more on a national or regional level, because it's like what well-being is in Singapore is maybe very different from well-being in somewhere in Ghana. You know, like it's depending on what infrastructure you already have, what kind of buildings are already there, what do the cities look like in terms of mobility? Do people need to move 10 kilometers per day to get to work or not, and so on? So it needs to be, you know, but we can say for sure that this excessive behavior that's skyrocketing out of the environmental boundaries, that should just go, you know. And we're so many and there's so few, and yet power holders are much more prone to listen to them because they have the economical power. So, but we have political power if we unite.
Thank you.
So thank you. So Julia, do you think there's time for the exercise? Maybe we should do it quicker, or should we just drop it?
Yeah, what does everyone feel like? Do you want to ask more questions, have a discussion, or would you like to do like an exercise? Quick.
Sorry, I have a question. I was about to type it. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm just inquisitive, and this is not directly a question to you, Isadora, but I just wanted to find out, maybe the team might know. I know that governments do this studies to find out what are the basic needs, or what's the basic needs that people want or need to survive or live in, like one household to the next. My question is more inquisitive in the climate justice space. Whether have we done some kind of a study to understand what people really need to survive? Because obviously we do need energy, we do need that. But have we, was there a study that was done to understand what really the people on the ground, household to household, what needs do they need to survive? Because I think in my little mind, I think if we were to also understand that in a climate justice lens, what people really need, perhaps that could also be in the local, be the start of how then we start changing the system change, understanding what people need, and then designing or implementing or advocating for solutions like that, because this is what comes from the people and this is what they require. So yeah, that was my question right there, just being inquisitive.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there are lots of regional, national studies, etc., that you can dig up. I think, I mean, often it's looked at from the other way around. So often it's like, you cannot spend more than 1 ton of CO2 per year. So it's often about limits, and it's often about, but this is a different approach from the sort of like, look at the needs. So, and maybe the needs are not only about, maybe it's about time with your loved ones. Also looking at, for instance, the care economy. Maybe you need, you know, like there, of course, there's also the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that the world has failed to deliver on, but there's all that work within those frameworks, so that's something to look into. And yeah, I mean, I'll just, you know, the exercise, you have it at the end of the presentation. Maybe I'll just pull it up quickly because I think it's the exercise is to like think about and do this at home or later for your campaign work. But think about, this is an example from The Guardian, when Biden came into power after Trump had been running for quite a while. Like, what would be the headline of the article on the front page of the newspaper you want to be in? You know, when you won, when you've succeeded with your work, you know, what will that article say? And when they describe in the article, like, what is it that has changed? And what are the 3 or main things that made it possible? Who was involved? How did this change come to be? I think it's a very good exercise to try to think about, formulate for yourself what you're actually working for, because often you get stuck in planning documents and someone talked about the needs from the funders and objectives and but like really visualize for yourself, what will the article when you've won look like? What will be the headline? Because, you know, change start with creating a meme inside your head of what you want, and then you put it on paper or talk to others about it, and then something start to happen. But unless it's really, really clear for you what the world you want to get to look like, then you will not get it. If you only think about what you want to stop and what's wrong and what's problematic, it's like the 1.5 degree. Sometimes we talk about it as a target for climate. It's not a target to reach the 1.5. It's the ditch that we don't want to run into. And yet we only talk about that ditch. We're like, don't run into the ditch, don't run into the ditch, don't run into the, but where are we going? What's this road about? What is this life about? What's important? Who are we doing this? And other interest groups are much better at meeting people there. So we in the climate movement need to get there as well.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, I will share, like, it's in the presentation, the exercise, but I'll share the links later. I think there's not enough time now. But does anyone else have any questions or thoughts they would like to share with the group and with Isadora? August, it looks like you're thinking on something. Olivia, do you have something?
I'm just thinking about what the ditch phrase that Isadora mentioned, and how much we use the 1.5 degree, and most of the time we say it's a target, whereas it's not. And that really speaks to how then we frame things to ourselves and also to the community outside. Because what we deliver to the communities or the youth or whoever may be, then that becomes something that sticks with them. And also the other thing I see with like communication, I think there's something that I see that there is a challenge that we're facing with, like, for example, the neo-colonial extractivism model. We play too much into their narrative. And we literally are not creating a parallel or secondary narrative that counts that narrative. So every time you read a paper about climate justice or whatever, there's always neo-colonialism, extractivism model that comes out from these papers. I think that the communication itself also needs to change. And when it changes, I think for me, I believe it should focus more on the solutions, not the problems, but saying community A has done this project, have started they building their own solar panels, their community is off the grid, they are using renewable energies, instead of speaking to the neo-colonial model, because that we're actually giving them more power to continue and perpetuate their activities or the extractivism model, because we are also playing in that narrative. So I think communication as well is something that we need to look at and how we phrase things. Thanks.
Thanks. Andila? Andila, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to take you back a bit on your presentation, thank you so much. When you spoke about the donut economy, so just a comment on that is that here in our country, in South Africa, we do have some municipalities who are applying that model, and it works very well, I think. So just a question. Earlier on, you spoke about the loss and damage fund. You were explaining the institutions that host this money. You spoke about the IMF and the World Bank. So in your opinion, Isadora, how would the countries in the global South access that funding in a fair and transparent way without having any way where we can find ourselves in maybe debt trap diplomacy and such? Just in your opinion, how are we going to access that money, and who, and what would be the criteria to say this country deserves this money and that one is going to come as a concessional loan, etc.? Thank you.
So I started on this well-being economy project in January. So and that is focusing slightly on those things. But I haven't built up sort of my own in-depth understanding of the ways the World Bank and the IMF operates. But like the problem is that there's so much payments of debt that, you know, the discourse is about debt cancellation, and this discourse is about this system doesn't work at all. And like later in the year, for instance, there's the UN Summit of the Future where they're talking about like removing some of the power from the World Bank to the UN. That could be because like at the moment, it's like Europe and US, those two institutions are US and Europe run. So like there's this concentration of power, and there's a completely flawed system that is it's never going to be possible to have any type of like the problem is not how to access I mean, either we need a global reform that put those two institutions out of power, maybe tricky, but there are some steps taken in that direction. But the other thing, the other slide that I showed that also linked to this presentation that I now link to, that's much more about building up an economy, because what he talked about in this presentation was that, you know, it wasn't all like, and also I'm out on deep water here now because it's not my area of expertise, but it wasn't, you know, all African countries wasn't always dependent on food aid the way it was. So, but because the systems with, you know, starting to sell these seeds that then need the weed chemicals to kill the, like you've gone from a system which was delivering more than enough to feed its population to depleting the soil, being hooked up on chemicals, being hooked up on global food giants. So he was much more focused on, okay, well, of course we need to reform the trade system, of course we need to reform the global financial architecture, but those things are tricky. Let's work on the here and now things that are doable. Let's build up manufacturing industries so that, you know, we can create local jobs, that etc. So that was. And that's a little bit what I'm trying to say in the presentation as well, that instead of thinking that we're going to change the way at the moment, for instance, you know, banks are creating a lot of the money in the system that is creating that debt. We need to get away from that. But that that will also, it's far in the future to see a change in that. But in the meantime, we can introduce all these other policies that are delivering all the things we want. So if we focus on what we want out of the policies, we don't have to focus on reforming the institutions, if you see what I mean. It's like, let's find other entry points that are beneficial here and now, and that would also serve as pillars of the new system. So I'm sorry for not being able to answer more in depth, but you know, there are lots of, like, for instance, tax inequality, there's like a number of allies that have in-depth information on these things that you could, if you're more interested in this topic, I can send you, you know, information about these type of organizations working on these things. Or later, when we deeper into the issue, we can also come back with more information.
Thank you.
Great. Any last questions from anyone that hasn't spoken yet? No. Okay. But then I just want to thank you, Isadora, for joining us, and I hope this was beneficial for the team. I think it was. I think it was beneficial for me, at least. But yeah, so thank you so much for today, and I'll see you in the team next week. And thank you, Isadora.
Thank you. Thank you. A pleasure to be here and to meet you and hear your perspectives on things. Really, really valuable. And good luck with all your fantastic work.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.